resident and a parent of a junior at Lexington High School. So over the past few months, I have heard a lot of different things about the high school project upgrade. It's a $1 billion project. It's about the solar panels. It's too big. It's not worth it. Students and families are hearing a lot about so many pieces floating here and there. And many of them aren't even sure what is true and what problems are we really trying to solve. So this video is our attempt to slow all of that down and bring some clarity. So instead of just talking about big numbers, we are going to focus on 3 things. What is it like to learn and work at LHS today? What is the Bloom design trying to fix? And how the town is thinking about the cost and the responsibility. So today you will hear from people who see this project from different angles. The school committee, the select board, and the PTO, each speaking from their own role and experience. So thank you so much, Sarah, Joe, and Catherine for being here tonight and sharing your valuable insights with us. Joe Pato, who is a member of the select board and the school building committee. He has served on the Lexington Select Board since 2013, including his 5th term bid in 2025. He was board chair for 3 terms and represents Precinct 2. As a select board member, he oversees town-wide governance, including project approvals and community forums. He is also an active SBC member, participating in design votes and the community forums, and the tax impact discussions. He advocates for Bloom as a second balanced option emphasizing student needs and taxpayer value. Sarah Carter. She's a member of the Lexington School Committee and has been actively involved in the Lexington High School rebuild and is an advocate for educational equity and student-centered design. This is her first full term. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Catherine Telliez, who serves as the LHS PTO President's Committee and has been hearing directly from families about this project. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you.
So to start with, I would invite Joe first to share how have you been connected to this entire school project, upgrade project.
So thank you for the introduction. Back when Lexington was admitted into the MSBA school program, we needed to create a school building committee. And I had served on enrollment projection committees and master planning committees, so the town asked me to be the select board member as part of that and warned me it's going to be a 7-year commitment.
That's a lot. Wonderful. Beautiful. Sarah, so how have your role been evolving with this entire upgrade project?
So I remember back in 2018 sitting at a PTO meeting at Clark where we invited Dr. Hackett to come. And she started talking about one of her big goals was to work to build a new high school, that she had submitted a letter of interest to the MSBA. So ever since then, I've been following what's been happening with that. Oftentimes as a parent, because at that point I had a kindergartner and a 6th grader and a 2nd grader. My kindergartner is now in 7th grade, and we have been moving along through this process. I've attended some of the meetings, not all of them, but I've been really trying to follow and hear what's been going on, hear different points of view, hear why we have made the choices we've made. And at this point, I think this is the best time and the best project for Lexington to move forward with this project.
Thank you, Sarah. Catherine, how have you been involved in this project as a PTO?
So I started as part of forums on the PTO. And when we first met Julie Hackett with all the parents at one of her meetings for all of us, she had mentioned about wanting all the PTOs to be more involved. And that was 3 years ago. So since then, it's taken a very long time, and many of us have really followed over the course of all these meetings that's been out there, including the visioning meeting, which is, I would say, about 2 years ago. Was it a year and a half? Maybe no, more like a year and a half, back in March last year. And this project has really evolved. There have been so many permutations, so many considerations. I have not attended all 200 meetings, thankfully, but I think that we are constantly informed. All the PTO and PTAs are working really hard to really better understand so that we can really inform our families and community about this project, and hopefully for them to decide positively to be able to move this project forward, because this is the very best project that we can actually have move forward for our children.
So, Joe, from the town's perspective, what overlapping narratives have created confusion about the LHS project? And how can sharing facts like those in this series can help build understanding of this project?
So from the town's perspective, this is a very large project. So it affects all of us as taxpayers. It affects all of us as property owners in what our values are going to be like. It affects us as residents who make use of the recreational complex that's part of this same campus. And it affects us as parents, though my children graduated quite a long time ago. But it affects us as parents in making sure that we're providing a quality context for the education they're receiving. So from my perspective, it's balance of what are the values for the town, and this project brings us to the best path forward.
So Sarah, from the school committee's perspective, how would you describe what it feels like to learn and work in LHS today, given the age of the building and the size of the student body?
So one of the stories that I like to tell is that I actually graduated from LHS about 30 years ago.
Wow.
And about 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to go back to LHS for a curriculum back to school night. And I walked up to the second floor of the main building and I looked down the hallway. And I pulled out my phone and I took a picture. And I sent it to the group chat of everyone that I went to, all my friends from high school. We still have a group chat going. And I said, "Where am I?" And immediately I got a response back, top floor G House, because back in the 90s, that was called G House. But many, many parts of the high school have not changed in 30 years. And back in the early 90s, it felt old because it was already 40 years old at that point. The high school has reached the end of its really effective life. And how does that affect learning? There's quite a lot of different things. And I think just about every student could find a story to tell about a too small classroom where they had to go sit in the hallway to do a group project, or a student who is possibly on the spectrum where the teacher can't adjust the lights to dim them, where it would make learning easier for that student, to students with mobility issues who worry and struggle about traveling outside in between buildings and hope that the conditions don't cause them to fall. There is such a wide range, but really, honestly, the facilities affect every single one of our students in small ways and in big ways. And it's almost impossible to articulate that in about 30 seconds.
Wow. So we have somebody who is not only working on LHS upgrade, but is also part of the LHS throughout her life, and is getting to experience the same thing for the children, you know, and your kids are already there in the LHS, and it's sad. It's really sad to see the same spaces again and again without any renovation, nothing in the 21st century.
So I do want to say, I honestly believe that the administration and the teachers do a phenomenal job of making sure that they are providing an extremely high level of education. And what really strikes me is how much the facilities are an additional barrier for them to be able to do that. When really, honestly, imagine how much better it will be when we have a facility that enables those types of innovative teaching, allows administration to really make sure that they are ensuring every student is getting what they're needing. Because right now the facilities are inhibiting that.
So Sarah, you just painted a picture of your time, right? And exactly in 1950s. How do you think these things today, the current setup, limits the collaborative learning or special education support, which you did partially already responded, but the collaboration part of it?
So one of the big movements in education right now is the idea of collaborating across disciplines, really working to create education where you pull in experts from lots of different areas and you create classes and learning centers for students to really think about how collaboration works together. There is a phenomenal class right now called BioArt, where you have a teacher who has a background in as being an active artist, but who also is a certified biology teacher. And he uses both of those disciplines to really help students look at the natural world from multiple different perspectives. And the assistant superintendent for secondary education would love to do more classes like this. That's really where she sees education going, and would love to think about how could we pull in math and English and talk about looking at data and writing stories about it. How do you look at data and interpret it in a narrative format? All sorts of different types of classes, but we don't have space for them. There's not room to really allow our teachers to be innovative and think about what the next step in education is going to be.
The slide, if you see, actually, highlights severe overcrowding with 2,367 students with a facility built for 1,850 students in space, right? So what safety and community impacts have you seen from this, and why is addressing this a very high priority?
So there's a variety of problems here. One is that to manage the enrollment that's there today, we are utilizing every room pretty much every minute of the day. It's running at around 97% utilization, somewhere in there, which means that some of those specialized electives and things like that, there's no place to put it. You couldn't have a slightly smaller class for a specialized activity. It means that when there are exams, like AP exams, it's very difficult to find the right rooms for the students to be able to take that exam with a proper proctor. So it creates a difficulty for delivering education, but it also creates difficulties in how the students move through the building. There are choke points. Sarah already spoke to students who have mobility issues, but every student has difficulty getting from one end of the campus to the other on time for their classroom. The school department has given extra long passing times to accommodate that, and yet it still is a challenge for anybody who has mobility issues. And then from a safety perspective, you have a lot of students who are required to move outside, and we really can't secure this campus in an emergency context with that kind of exposure. So it's not just elements, but it's also who is it that they're coming in contact with. All of these things come together, and the more students you have, that it makes each of these problems more difficult.
So Joe, from the town side, how do the aging systems, steam, pneumatics, roof leaks, they combine with the overcrowding to create a compounding challenge? What does that mean in terms of the risk and the cost today?
So the aging systems, almost all of the systems at the high school are at end of life or long past end of life. And when I raise that, what's important to us from our facilities department's perspective is it's gotten to the point where it's difficult for them to get parts to jury rig repairs for some of these systems. And there are others like the roof system, which needs to be replaced, which is leaking. Now, they go and patch the leaks, et cetera, but it's at an age where leaks will start appearing all over the place, and there are cascading problems. Like when a leak occurs over an elevator shaft and the water starts hitting some of these sensors, it triggers calls to the fire department. And over the past few weeks, we've seen numerous occasions where the school has to be evacuated because the fire alarms are going off until they can figure out what was it that triggered this. Even though there was no danger to the students, you can't know until you get in there and look. So all of these systems are leading to both high expense in repair, which we are deferring right now because we're expecting to replace the building. And these are millions to tens of millions to multiple tens of millions of dollars systems, right? The total cost for renovating and repairing a lot of this gets us into the $300 million range. So prudently, financially, we have chosen to defer that now, because spending money at that level to then replace it because the building really is inadequate from an educational perspective is a mistake. But we're near the end of our rope on being able to delay these things.
I can so relate to it. We live in a house which is like built in 1960s, and we had a leaking roof. And then the contractor couldn't find the same replacement thing. So I can so relate to it. But this is like just a resident who's experiencing that. I can so imagine that what it's like for a school to do it for the school students, right? And for the staff, and how are they managing all those alarms, fire alarms, evacuation, what kind of disruptions this must be causing in the learning. It's beyond imagination, the impact on the students at this point in time. So thank you so much for sharing the impact of this aging infrastructure, which you can see from the slide. Some of them are 70 years old. Some of them are like, roof is like already leaking, which is 15 plus years old, and so on. So Sarah, can you share an example of how a program like science labs, performing arts, or special education has to compromise because the spaces simply aren't big enough or properly designed?
So I can think of two big examples that I generally talk about. At this point, for our student athletes, in order to compete in some of the sports, we have had to get exceptions through the Minuteman League for our facilities because it doesn't meet the requirements that they normally have for sports. One example is volleyball. We have to have a special rule for our piping, our HVAC piping in the roof of the gym, of what happens when a volleyball hits that, just for our gym. But there's so many other examples. Our gym is much too small for a school of our size, and that impacts our student athletes. I've had parents ask me, why can't we have more teams? Why can't we have a freshman volleyball team? Why can't we have intramurals? And space is really the issue. I know that our director of physical education would love to offer these types of programs. We just don't have anywhere to hold them. I can also think of our lab program, which is the collaborative that we are part of that provides services for our students with severe developmental disabilities. And ideally, in a situation like that, their curriculum would be working to really ensure they're teaching life skills, and the teachers are doing a phenomenal job working to do those things. But you go to any of the surrounding high schools that have similar programs, and their classrooms have a kitchen space to help teach cooking. They'll have a laundry facility to help teach them how to do laundry. And we don't have any of those things. And you wonder long term about the detriment that we aren't able to provide that type of curriculum for those students.
So sounds like the high school campus operates like a small, rapidly aging single-lane highway, attempting to handle the traffic volume of a major metropolitan area. So not only is the volume far too high, creating hazardous congestion and preventive effective movement, but the road itself is riddled with potholes, and critical off-ramps needed for specialized vehicles is completely blocked or non-existent, right? Wow. Knowing all the challenges which we just heard in the LHS, which are ongoing right now, the concept of IDP involved, and which was based on the core values of LPS today. Is there something specific which resonates with you on the LPS side of the core values? Some of them are joy in learning, curiosity in life, compassion of all what we do, something which specifically resonates with you.
I think when we think about the LPS program and our system and what we are really trying to ensure that we are teaching our students so that they can become effective, happy adults. These are really the guiding principles that we as educators, as parents, as administrators really hope that we are teaching our students. And once again, when we think about the facilities at LHS, We wonder if the facilities are hindering our ability to teach these values and help our students become fully functional adults as they move on out into the world, or if they are helping us do those things. And right now, the facility is making it harder to help our children feel like they belong, to help our students feel happy and joyful in a classroom, in a learning environment. If you're sitting in a class cold because the heat's not getting there on the steam pipe, or you're very hot because we don't have air conditioning or great windows in many of the classrooms, that's not going to add to your joy. You're going to dread going to those classes. And we really want to make sure that we are providing an environment where students are able to take part in the lessons to the fullest of their abilities.
So could you just share something about the IDP, the policy foundation which drives healthy and sustainable design?
So the IDP is the integrated design policy, and it calls for us to create healthy buildings that are designed for sustainable delivery, energy efficient, and are quality buildings. It is a policy that the town adopted a number of years ago, and we've applied to several schools, well, Hastings and the fire station, the police station, and it is our standard policy. It is really focused on making sure that what we create is healthy for the occupants, and then that what is built is something that is going to be financially prudent from a energy system perspective. So we call for inclusion of locally generated power, solar panels, for use of all electric equipment to minimize fossil fuel consumption. And we call for elimination of red list items, not including toxic materials in the construction of the building. When this is designed early, typically the construction costs are either in line or even better than conventional design processes. When you wait to think about, oh, can we put in a more efficient heating system later, then it becomes more difficult to do. So this has been very successful for us. And one of the things that I learned today at the school building committee meeting was the stretch code that we've adopted here, that it goes along with this policy, is moving into the base building code for the state. So that by the time we go to build this, if we hadn't been designing like this, we would have had to redesign to accommodate that. So this has been forward-thinking, but a really good value for the town.
So sounds like the town has a really good vision in terms of moving to a right, healthy space, learning space, which we would want to really. And you did mention about the red list items. Can you share up something more about that? Does that exist in LHS today?
So honestly, I don't know. I imagine so, because when this was built in the 50s, 60s, et cetera, there were not as much awareness of materials. I know that when we built the police station, there were very few items that weren't on the red list. And those items were things that were encapsulated inside building materials, so they weren't exposed to the occupants. And so this policy is not draconian, right? It doesn't say, it says if you can't find an alternative, can it be made use of in a way that it's not exposing the occupants of the building to the negative effects.
So, Catherine, do you want to share your recent experience as when you were a proctor in the SAT exam and you were experiencing that cut grass and everything? Like, how does the entire infrastructure impacts when somebody has a health issue or somebody is allergic and your infrastructure doesn't even secure you in terms of
So one
how
of
you
the
feel
things
today?
that I think that there's people think that by sort of renovating this current building, that we would be saving money per se. And I think that one of the things that I learned when I was proctoring in one of the classrooms, and I learned also from others that were proctoring, I was proctoring downstairs, other people were proctoring upstairs. So in the classroom I was in, the radiators are all banging away like crazy. And they had all the town just made a mistake and allowed for facilities to do lawn mowing and blowing everything outside. And you can hear absolutely everything outside. However, the clanging and everything else you can hear inside. But I could smell, even though all the windows were really well closed, I can actually smell the cut grass. So there is no filtration system between the outside and the inside. I don't know how it got in, right? And then as I'm proctoring these kids who amazingly were, like, there were 12 kids, I put them far away from the windows, right? And they're working away at the SATs and you know, in terms of working on the math and reading. I'm like, how are they being able to deal with this? And they are, right? But then one of the other proctors come in and said, do you want to open the windows? I'm like, no way. It turned out on the second floor, instead of being like this cold air blowing, the second floor was too hot. So all those kids, they wanted to open the windows because they were sweltering in there. But they couldn't open the windows because of the noise, right? So our current building doesn't really give much space for the kids to do very much. I mean, as it is, the rooms are quite small, 25 desks in that room where all the desks are moving around, and you know, you can hear they're old desks. You know, this building is like 72 years old, I guess, built in 1953. A lot of the stuff they're in there probably been there for that long. So I mean, I think that we have a true opportunity with what this town is trying to do to really update so that we actually have a building that is functional. We have furniture, we have everything that is functional for our kids. It's not going to be the best, but it is going to be more than good enough. And it, you know, for some people it may look like because it's new, therefore it's too good. We're not going for secondhand stuff. We're going for things that is going to be useful for our kids, you know, from now into the future.
The slides show that the committee looked at many options, right? Repairs, multiple on-site designs, and off-site locations. Can you walk us through how Bloom emerged as the best overall choice?
So this was a long process of the various approaches, and we started by looking at all the properties in town that the town owned, reducing that to the number of properties that were vaguely possible, and then eventually reducing it to which ones were actually possible. And it really is just that central campus. So on that site, we started by imagining different approaches, including a high-rise. That wasn't in the 19, right? That was as we started visioning how to approach building in the location and minimizing disruption. Eventually, we got to 19 different concepts and reduced it to three that were ad renos on the general footprint of the existing high school, and 3 that were new construction on the playing fields adjacent to the existing high school. That was winnowed down to 1 of each as the preferred options. Bloom was the new construction option, and I've forgotten the name of the one that we had for ad reno. And along the way, we were able to shift the footprint of Bloom a bit so that it reduced the number of fields that were going to be affected, so that we were able to limit it to just the practice field, the football field, and the Little League field, which are all going to be recreated in when we swap the buildings. So that process, we looked at what was the financial costs associated with the particular approach, what was the timing, what was the disruption that it created for the students and for faculty and for the neighbors. In all of those dimensions, the Bloom design came out as the best alternative. Could there be a million other potential designs? Certainly. But we've spent 2 years narrowing and examining key considerations, and this came out heads and shoulders above the other approaches.
Wow, that's a lot of work, 2 years evaluating a design. I can just imagine brainstorming for 2 years, 18 designs, then finalizing something on, Bloom. I'm sure there must have been a lot of aftermath and a lot of work in terms of evaluating what's right for the town, right? And many residents I've heard, they have asked, why not spend a smaller amount on repairs, in Plain? Would a $300 million repair path actually fix? And what would say the same for students and staff?
The $300 million repair addresses the the ventilation, the heating and ventilation system. It addresses the roof, the windows, all of the failing systems in the school today. It makes the school ADA compliant, because once you start spending above a certain percentage of the value of the building, you have to comply with the current ADA requirements. And that's it. It doesn't
So no
fix
square footage increase, nothing.
no increase in square footage, no increase in the traffic patterns in the building, no changes in the facility to allow us to create emergency security measures. So it is $300 and some million, and it does make the current facility work the way it works today, which is way overcrowded also. So to really address the student population, we would also have to build an addition. So the $300 and some million is a required analysis that we did for the MSBA, but it's not a viable solution to what we have ahead of us as a problem for our community.
So no increase in the space, no enhancement in the user experience, the same crowded place, the same overcrowding, same overcapacity issues, everything would be the same after spending $300 million on the repairs to match those ADA codes, right? Would that again be adjusted against the taxpayers?
So $300 million of work isn't something that the town can absorb in the current tax level. So we would go out for a debt exclusion for that as well. And as I said, we probably wouldn't be able to just go out for that because we are overcrowded. So we would probably have to go out with a package of projects that would carry the costs well beyond the current Bloom proposal. I mean, when we looked at, we had to price this out, not just at the repair level, but we looked at the ad renos, the addition renovations, and those were the different variations that fixed the school and expanded the space and looked to try to create some improvements in the footprints. Those were all significantly more expensive and took a lot longer. And when they were finished, you ended up with an inferior product, because any of the additions that attach to the renovations, the floor heights aren't the same. So then you have these long corridors with ramps between the old buildings and the new buildings. It just was not a good set of solutions.
So, Joe, the teams investigated a lot of off-site locations around the town, right? What were the main reasons those parcels ultimately did not work for a high school? We have around 299 parcels evaluated.
Right, so there are 299 parcels that the town owns. Many of those just aren't sized properly. Many of them are conservation land or have severe wetland restrictions that wouldn't let us build on it. And almost all of them weren't large enough. As I had mentioned earlier, we did narrow it down to a number that were plausible, but they were not effective. They're in locations where the traffic would be impossible to accommodate the 2,400 students that we expect to be moving in and out. Or they were in locations where the surroundings were inadequate for putting any playing fields. So that would require students to go to school in one place, and then sports and athletic activities that you'd have to bus to. So that the center complex became the only viable approach for a building the size we're looking for.
What should we understand from this slide of the project budget breakdown? Like, how much is the MSBA? Why does the, what kind of percentage is that for MSBA reimbursement?
So the MSBA will reimburse communities at about 32%. And then if you are a community with a economic need, you get bonus points and increases the reimbursement amount. Lexington does not qualify for that. If you do certain energy efficiency and sustainability goals, you get up to 4% increase, which we qualified for. And if you have a track record of quality maintenance, and for all of the deficiencies in our buildings, our facilities department has actually done an outstanding job keeping it running, and the MSBA recognized that and has given us 1.95 points out of the 2 potential points, and which is one of the highest that they've given for communities for their maintenance activity. So that's the reimbursement rate. The effect, but they don't reimburse for everything. So they don't reimburse for the field house. They don't reimburse for central office. They don't reimburse for going to a larger gym like we're doing or a larger auditorium like we're doing. So the net reimbursement or the effective reimbursement rate is lower, and it's hovering somewhere below 20%.
How do you think about value when one option just keeps the light on, which is $300 million on repair, and other transforms educational space in $532 million, $532.9 million? Like, what exactly stands out here?
So I think that's something that we each, as individual taxpayers and voters, need to look at. But for me, I look at that $300 million or $300 and some million investment just for the repairs and say, you end up with a facility that has all of the functional problems we have today. And we're not removing the barriers to education that stand in the way of further success for our young children, our young residents. They're not so young. So there are hugely qualitative differences, but I think that as a community, we each need to take a look. And for me, the decision was simple. The $300 million is essentially throwing away good money for a bad result. I wish it was all cheaper, but these are what construction costs in Massachusetts are these days.
There has been a lot of comparisons with different schools. I have heard that. Let's compare Waltham, Arlington. When we talk about the comparisons, are they really comparable? Is it an apple-to-apple comparison, or is it like, oh, this school did great? Like, but what is the, what is the facts here?
Right. So all schools are unique, and all communities are. The sites are different. The educational programs, the demands, the community access is different. So it's never apples to apples, but we do try to compare them, make corrections for some of those differences. And we took a look at a collection of projects that were done over the last decade to see where we were. Now, one of the big challenges is there was huge inflation in construction that came during the COVID period. So anything that was bid, even if it was built and just finished construction recently, but if it was bid before COVID, that's a huge price difference between what you can get today. And we're projecting forward for us what construction costs will be when we go out to bid, which is still about 2 years away, not today. There's also differences between projects that are all new construction on a site that you don't have any problems. So Revere, for example, didn't have anything there. It was an effectively empty site. We have to deal with building while we have students immediately adjacent. So there's additional costs associated with that. We have schools like Burlington or towns like Burlington where they were going to do an addition and renovation because their building was too large. It was built for 2,000 students, but they only have 1,000. They only project having 1,000 students. So they were able to use large spaces, like they had 2 gymnasiums, they had a large auditorium with relatively minor renovations, and then build new for portions that they needed to accommodate modern education. When you look at a per square foot cost, the fact that they had these very large spaces that didn't need much work artificially depressed the per square foot cost. When we looked at the actual construction costs that they were projecting for the new construction and compared that to ours, their construction was actually slightly more expensive than ours. So again, it's never apples to apples, so you have to peel away and take a look, what is the closest comparison and make some adjustments and see where we are. And when we've done that, we see that we're actually in line with how projects are moving forward at this time in Massachusetts.
So these are the different cost and features which were compared against every school, and this was the cost price per square foot. And there's also a display of the square foot price of the Lexington, even though it's not an apple-to-apple comparison, but a fair idea of how much we are paying per square foot, right, in terms of the upgrade. So now LHS Bloom unique features, right? This is the only project with 100% all-electric plus full geothermal. Only project with Article 97. Zero temporary modulars. I have heard that even if we were doing a comparison with other towns like Arlington, they had a lot of modular things, and we do not want to go there, like, creating modular. We already are in that, we are already past that phase of, of our school. And we did not even pay for any kind of contamination cost, which I heard that even Waltham went for a massive contamination site cleanup. So it's a lot which creates a unique line for us to look at how high school Lexington is very differently placed in terms of the structuring of the cost, right? Key features of how the other schools are placed in terms of the square footage, what was that renovation look like, and as you correctly mentioned, like anything before the COVID and where there were no trade tariff wars, it was much cheaper, and there is no comparison now. I mean, working in a manufacturing company, we actually had a rooftop of high level of, we paid almost to our vendors like 3 times the money which we would generally pay for our spares and hardware parts. So when when we adjust for things like all electric systems, geothermal, solar, and the new code construction, how does Lexington's project really compare to recent high school projects? Does everybody has a solar array, or they just have solar panels, or maybe some partial geothermals? Like, how does it really account for?
So all of those things. Many of the school systems are trying to be ready to put solar panels on. Some have partial geothermal. Some are trying to get all electric. Again, as I said, we are adhering to the stretch code that Lexington has adopted, which is a state building code, which leads us down these paths. By the time we go to construction, we expect this actually to have wandered into the base building code. So today, we're sort of a little bit out there in going to being a fully net zero building, which means we're producing as much power as we consume. And the design is, if you look at how we're going to consume day one, it is hopefully producing more power, because over the lifespan of that infrastructure, it decays a little bit. So you need to produce a little bit more at the beginning, so that by the end of the 30 years lifespan of those panels, you're still producing in the order of magnitude that you need for the building. So what we've done a lot of is, what is the life cycle cost for all of these elements? And they're providing financial value to the town on our operating expenses, so that by the time we get to having to do the 30-year renovation of mechanical systems, we will have spent a lot less than a lot of the conventional approaches would have taken us to.
And this is the new high school building which has been proposed, which has an exterior and how the sitting layouts would look like. And this entire this picture actually shows that how the different labs would be situated, where they would be situated, how the movements would be felt in the entire corridor or in the hallways, how exactly the expanded spaces would look like. So Sarah, from an educational standpoint, what are the most important ways Bloom's layout and spaces improve on today's building?
So one of the things that I'm very excited about, as well as Principal Andrew Baker at the high school, is the idea of having the ability to group classes for different grades together. So for example, right now, our English and social studies classes at the freshman year are the same group of students. And oftentimes the classes are set up so they're near each other, but that's not always able to happen. And what we're going to be able to do moving forward is set up areas where we have all of the freshmen social studies and English classes, as well as possibly some of their earth science classes, math 2, so that students and the teachers can all really feel a little bit more connected and be able to work together a lot more effectively.
In the entire Bloom design, can you explain how the contingencies work in this budget? What are they for, and what happens if some of that contingency money isn't needed?
So at this point in the design, we are designing for what the cost is for everything that's been designed, but we know that there's still going to be some evolution of the design, so there's money put into design contingencies, there's money allocated for construction contingencies and for owner contingencies. We have $124.3 million worth of contingencies in the budget, which includes money for what if tariffs change? What if, so that estimates of what kind of pricing for materials goes up. We do this for every project. We have a lot more today in this project than typically we do because there are some more uncertainties, especially with regard to things like tariffs. But we're pretty confident that this will cover what will come forward. MSBA, Mass School Building Authority projects, most of them return a reasonable double-digit percentage of the contingencies before the end of the project. They don't need them. Our history has been with our construction projects that we have been under budget for the final construction, and we haven't used all of the contingency. So again, if we end this project and didn't need all the contingencies, we will never borrow that money, and it will be less taxpayer impact. The calculator that we demonstrate for taxpayer impact shows the worst case. Because that's what we have in the budget. But the probability is that it'll be lower. The other thing I think that people don't really understand is this is a project that is following construction manager at risk contracting.
CMR, yeah.
So we've hired the construction manager. We will be going through three more estimating cycles, and at that point, the third one, which we have construction documents that are about to go out for bids, the construction manager is going to give us a guaranteed price. And as long as we don't put in change orders to say, oh, we want another wing built over here, or we want to, we want to change this layout, as long as we just move forward with this design, that's the maximum price. And if there are cost overruns, the construction manager eats it. If it comes in cheaper, we all benefit.
So it's like an insurance if something goes up, but if it doesn't go up, we take the still, which doesn't happen in the insurance. So it's a win-win situation for us. So is it that the owner's contingency is the only part which is not, if it is not being utilized, comes back as an under?
No, all of the contingencies, if they're not needed.
If they're not
we
needed,
will
even if it is being regulated, even if it is controlled by a project manager or a designer?
Right, I mean, this is all our money. Right?
Okay.
So, and for any of those elements that it's allocated for, if we don't need all of that contingency, that never gets used.
And Lexington has had a very good history in terms of doing, executing a lot of infrastructure projects under budget, right?
Right.
Most of them, yeah. We are going to have a separate video on in terms of showcasing the responsible infrastructure upgrade in Lexington. I heard that even despite that we have a larger space in the new school, it would be still a 40% or 50% utilization of the electricity.
Right. So we're moving to an all-electric building, but we are expecting not to be consuming very much electricity from the grid. And when we consume it from the grid, we expect to be consuming it at off hours and storing it in batteries and then using it during the day, which you and I are residential consumers of electricity, and we pay the rates that the electric company charges. The town and commercial properties do that, plus the electric company says every month we're going to measure your consumption every 15 minutes, and we'll find the peak amount for that month and then charge you for all of your power you consumed based on that peak amount, which often adds, again, as much as you are paying for your electric consumption. So by using the kind of systems we're designing for the Bloom project with battery storage, we're able to shave the peak, make it so that we're consuming power off hours, storing it, and then when we're consuming more power, we're actually using our own either stored or sun-generated power during the day.
There is an upfront saving of $15 million, right? And we're talking about the 532.9, right?
Yes.
Right. So we are going to save upfront $15 million, right, by investing in the HVAC systems.
Right. I mean, this is as compared to a conventional gas-fired system. And normally you would have thought those were cheaper. But by designing early and really rolling all of the systems together, we were able to design a geothermal and air source heat pump system that comes in cheaper from day one.
And the entire cost of the entire clean energy would be a payback period of just 7 years. So I think we are spending around $95 million on that, and the payback period would be 7 years.
Right, and you should also know that in our projections of the costs, we know that there are going to be some incentives from the state, et cetera. Those are not rolled into these costs because they don't come to us before we build the building. They're paid later, so there'll be offset monies that we get from the state that will be able to then offset some of the debt service that we have or other expenses the town has. But this is showing you what the payback period is, but it's actually quicker when you factor in some of those benefits.
And with the same clean energy, we are also reducing our carbon footprint. That means 90% carbon dioxide and the toxic emissions would be reduced in the environment. So we are not only creating a good and healthy building, but we're also being a very responsible people on the earth to save all the carbon footprints, and not only with LHS, but with other buildings so far we have built, right? Do you have any insight or sharing something there?
That's right. It is something that we've been striving for and I've been doing fairly successfully. The other thing that some people are concerned about is embedded carbon. Let's say in an existing building, you already have carbon in those materials. Most of the material that is in the existing school is going to be recycled and reused elsewhere, so that embedded carbon is going to be preserved, not wasted. And when you take a look at the carbon generation of this new building over the lifespan, it is so much lower than what that old facility was providing that it is a net great win for the environment.
So if it's a 7-year payback period of $95 million, that's a projected cost. So we are talking about the Bloom cost as $532.9 million, right? Which has your contingencies, which has your, the net energy cost. So if we reduce everything, the cost of the school upgrade project goes further down. It not only is 532, but with all the savings which we have. Of course, all the clean energy is an operational, budget which actually gets benefited there. But we are still, the numbers gets really, really reduced, right?
It does, but it's something that from speaking with the public about what we're going to be doing, don't really stress that or quantify. Some of these are difficult to quantify today.
Sure,
It'll depend on the actual use.
Absolutely.
So all we can really talk about, here's what it's going to cost to build, and here's what, how that is a financially good choice. What you can take away is it's actually better than that. We just can't promise how much better, so we don't want to quantify it.
Definitely. Yeah, it's like taking a soft training and like not figuring out like how much would it have an impact on our own behaviors when we are going through a communication training, something like, right? Joe, people care a lot about fields and recreation. What should families know about which fields are affected during construction and how play space is maintained over those 4.5 years of construction time?
Right, so the construction is going to affect only the fields that are going to be relocated. So it'll be the football field, the practice field, and the Little League field. During construction, that'll all be fenced off. It'll be with higher fences so that it's less intrusive to the neighborhood and to the students in the existing building. The laydown area occurs in that area. Where the workers will be parking is in that area. They'll be going in and out from Worthen Road. There will be an emergency access from Park Drive, but they won't be going in and out of that during normal business. during the 3 years of construction for the new building, it's all contained in that space. At the end of 3 years, in the fall of 2029, the students will move to the new building, and the fences will move to the other side. And the old building will be taken down first, and then the fields that were disrupted during construction will be recreated on the footprint of the existing school and parking lot area.
This is the tax impact. We were talking about the $300 million, then we were talking about the Bloom price, which is $522.9 million, right? So I do not have a slide on like what would the repair cost would look like on the tax amount, but I do have a slide from our town meetings about like how would it look like the tax burden because of the on the LHS upgrade.
You'll see that
Thank you.
there is an annual escalation moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's because Proposition 2.5 allows us to do that. And we increase because there's inflation.
Sure.
And most of our expenses are salaries, and the employees that we're paying are coping with inflation. The other portions of our budget are for materials that are also inflating in cost. So you'll see a fairly steady growth. If you were, the lower one is in real dollars, which is said, well, there is inflation going on. What will it look like in the future to us? And that pretty much levels off. Certainly from the perspective of what this incremental tax burden is for the project, that will be a smaller bite on individuals' earnings, income, because their income's going up with inflation and the like. That's just like people's mortgages. When they first get their mortgage, it might be as much as they can afford, but as time proceeds, it is less of a burden because the value of money has changed over time due to inflation. So this chart gives a better sense of that, so that it isn't just looking at it and saying it's always going up, because it's not going up in current dollars.
All right. So I think now we're at the closing of our interview session. Last thing from everyone. Like, what is the one thing you hope community members will remember about the connection between this building project and the students' daily experience at LHS? Sarah?
So, like I've said a number of times, there are multiple things that factor into a student's success. And oftentimes we think about the curriculum, we think about the teachers, we think about the classes that have to offer. But in all honesty, the building also factors into that. And we have just reached the point with our current high school where we have to do something. Not ignoring it and waiting is not an option anymore. And the Bloom project is the project that will meet our needs and solve many of the problems that we as a community have at the lowest cost in the least amount of time and will be the least disruptive to our students.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, Joe.
So Sarah said it. And I think the other thing that's really important is that the high school is primarily, fundamentally, and firstly, a location of education for our youth, but it is also a center of our social activity, recreational activity. It will provide a facility that gives a lot more value for community engagement in these spaces. So it is really looking at what is our joint future that we are creating. And as Sarah said, this really was the cheapest, fastest, most appropriate design to move forward with.
I think both Joe and Sarah said it all. This school is the school for our future, for the town of Lexington, and we should all applaud all the work that all the members of the school building committee, now the permanent building committee, is doing, and all the efforts that everyone has put into to make this happen. So we should take this opportunity, really, really relish the opportunity to really build the school for the future of our students and for our town.
I so want to thank you for all the panelists coming here tonight and sharing their valuable insights on this project and how is it like for the LHS students, teachers, how the failing infrastructure is impacting our community today, and what it's important and what are the right elements to be taken care of in terms of considering certain options. So thank you so much for being here tonight.